In this video, I'll tell you about 4 mech games that I'm playing or will be playing soon. And none of them are Battletech. If you're watching this video on the day that it launches, then I'm at Gen Con 2024 in Indianapolis, Indiana. It's the biggest tabletop gaming convention in America. Last year was something like 72,000 people, and it's board games, it's role-playing games, it's collectible card games, and then, kind of pulling up the rear, tabletop miniatures games. Miniatures are pretty much the smallest part of Gen Con, if I'm honest. But since the convention's so big, there's still a decent amount of miniature stuff going on. Maybe I'll see you there. I'll be looking for mechs. I've been getting a little more into some mech games recently, but before you get excited, none of those games have been Battletech. Battletech was my first ever tabletop miniatures game way back in middle school, like in the 1980s. And we didn't even really play with miniatures at the time. We played with little cardboard standees that came with the starter box, you know? I picked it up again, Battletech, in college for a while, at which point we were actually playing with miniatures, and I even painted a few. And I've played a little bit, just a tiny bit of it about maybe 10 years ago, but I've just found that it's not for me. I'm not really a fan of the rule set. That's the biggest issue. So I've been looking at other options out there. And there are options, as long as you're okay with indie games and indie game companies. Battletech is the biggest mech game out there, so if you need a game to have huge Kickstarters and fancy plastic models and a product on shelves at your local store, then you will probably want to try out Battletech and therefore probably find a different YouTube video to check out, to learn more about Battletech, because this one's not going to be about that. Being the most popular mech game out there, I'm sure that there's plenty of videos about kind of how to get into it and all that kind of stuff. A simple YouTube search will get you sorted. But if you're looking for something with simpler rules and fewer of them, a nice kind of thin rulebook in general, then I've got 2 favorites and 2 sort of kind of runners up, let's say. Still really cool, but maybe different than you're used to. The first 2 have the added benefit that you can use your Battletech figures if you want, that you already have, or just go buy some Battletech miniatures from your local store and use those as well. These first 2 also have their own miniatures lines as well. It's true. The last 2 games that I'm going to talk about are kind of special cases. Battletech models won't really work with those games. The first game I'll mention is Steel Rift, which I've talked about here on the channel before. Published by Death Ray Designs, makers of all kinds of cool stuff, but mostly known for their laser-cut MDF terrain. It's designed by Ash Barker. You probably know him through his YouTube channel, Guerrilla Miniature Games, which I've also talked about on the channel here as well. It's not a real lore-heavy game, Steel Rift, right? But there is a bit of a story to kind of get you rolling. Humanity kind of all got together, got on the same page to some degree, and they harnessed the sun. They built this, not an entire Dyson sphere, but a Dyson array around the sun, and then everybody had unlimited power, and we started moving out into the cosmos and that kind of stuff. And then the sun sort of got angry about the yoke that we had put on it and destroyed it with giant solar flares and solar storms, and then it was back to the human race fighting for survival. In Steel Rift, the mechs are called HEVs, or Humanoid Endoskeletal Vehicles. As I said, you can use whatever models you want. I see a lot of people on the official, Steel Rift Discord using Battletech mechs, but they also sell a full line of HEVs that are 3D printed for you and then shipped to you, so you don't have to print them yourself. And they're incredibly modular, so you can build them however you like. They're also a lot of them are really, really cool, which also drew me to the game. There are 3 main factions in the game: authorities, corporations, and freelancers. And then there are some sub-factions under each of those as well. There's tons of weapons options and customization available for your forces as well. Since launch, there have been 2 expansions as well. Burning Horizons, which adds new vehicles like tanks and other kind of support units, and then Close Quarters, which basically adds melee weapons for your HEVs. I've mainly just stuck with the main, book myself because I kind of just want the mechs, and the idea of melee weapons isn't too interesting to me, but that's what's great about modular game design. You as the player get more agency to craft the game how you like to play. Also, the main game book is literally like about 36 pages, so the rules are streamlined and fast playing. Steel Rift is my favorite mech game right now, mainly because of the streamlined rules, the customization to designing your HEVs, and like I said, I kind of fell in love with some of the models. I've painted 2 forces so far for Steel Rift. The Freelance Industrial Force, who I did in kind of an orange color scheme, kind of makes me think of like, industrial, like high-vis color to some degree. And then I also did the Authority, who I painted in kind of a dirty white with blue accents. I was kind of trying to mimic the giant U.S. Army tanks from last year's sci-fi movie, The Creator. I just thought they were amazing looking and all that kind of stuff. So I wanted to do that with the Authority mechs that I were making here. The game's just really fun and fast, and I'm thinking about maybe painting some more models. The next game is pretty indie, but that means that you can check it out currently for free. Flames of Orion from Under the Dice, which is a cool kind of gaming zine from Stephen Hupfer from the Hive Scum podcast. You've probably heard me talk about the Hive Scum podcast here as well on the channel before. Check out the podcast, seriously. It's one of my favorites. Flames of Orion is growing in popularity amongst the indie scene, and it's because it's just a fun and interesting rule set. It was demoed at Adepticon and a bunch of other small conventions, also including my little convention, Tabletop Minions Expo, back in the beginning of June. And it's been getting around, and a lot of people have been getting interested in it, including myself. Again, you can use 6mm scale kind of Battletech mechs if you want. Maybe kit bash them up, like my good friend Sam Lenz did just recently. He just made a fun video about kit bashing a battle mech for Flames of Orion. Pachow. But they also do have a small selection of technically official miniatures made for Flames of Orion by Ramshackle Games. Link is down in the description. You've got a ton of different options for the mechs that you want to use. You pretty much always bring just four mechs to a battle, right? You can have more in your roster, but you always just bring 4 to play a game with. There's tons and tons of gadgets and weapons that you can outfit your mechs with, and there's an interesting kind of heat mechanic that I like as well. You constantly have to deal with heat in your mech, like you do in many mech-style games, but as the game is being played in the Orion system and that star is burning out, you have to roll for kind of random heat spikes in your mech at the end of every single turn. Everybody does. So you're not just fighting against the heat buildup from your combat, but also just from the heat of the dying sun. It really helps to kind of keep the game interesting and unexpected. I have a printed version of the alpha test that I got back at Adepticon, but there have been more updates and additions to the overall rule set since then. Currently, you can download the most recent alpha test version, which is, I think, version 0.6, I believe, at the Flames of Orion link down in the description below. There's also a Discord, so you can talk about the game and ask questions and stuff like that. I've painted the Ramshackle models for Flames of Orion, and it's been a lot of fun. And I'll be kit bashing up some more forces for Flames of Orion very soon. So these next runners-up, for lack of a better term, are both substantially different games than Steel Rift, Flames of Orion, and Battletech, mainly because they use a totally different scale. Instead of the normal 6mm scale for mech games, where a mech is usually about 1.5 inches tall or smaller, these two games are in 28mm scale, like Warhammer and other games like that. Therefore, the mechs for these two games are supposed to be about 4 inches tall to make them big robots instead of just human-sized robots. That means you're probably not just using Battletech minis to play these games. The idea is to kit bash cool minis at about a 4-inch height to play these games. You could probably also 3D print something if you wanted. With 3D printing, you can just enlarge or reduce, depending on the size of the thing, the model. In the software, you can change its scale in the software and then print the mini, again, like I said, whatever size you want. But either way, you get to be creative and make the much larger mechs that you want to play with in these games. The other benefit is that you can probably just use your current 28mm scale terrain, whereas the 6mm scale terrain, when you start playing with that, you need tinier buildings and tinier little trees to make the mechs look big, right? The first one is called Mech 28, and it's made by Bill Ward, aka Berserkerworks on Instagram. Link below for the website link and also for Bill's Instagram. I, again, got a printed version of it at Adepticon this last year, but you can download a free version in TXT format, not even PDF, right? Just straight text. It's kind of cool, actually, a little retro, from the link in the description. It's very short and streamlined, and also like Flames of Orion, it's in alpha test stage. But it's very playable. There's not really any scenarios yet, right? But you can make up your own scenarios pretty easily. You need bigger, like I said, 4-inch mechs, but you only need 2 to 3 mechs per person. It's not very long. The printed booklet I got is like 16 pages, including the cover. And the rules are, like I said, streamlined, but feel solid and they're enjoyable to me. It uses an interesting kind of alternating activation scheme for the mechs, and the rules are written in a very kind of casual way, which I enjoy. Many rules just seem to end with the line, it might explode, which generally makes for the best mech games, in my opinion, when stuff explodes. I'm hoping I can find stuff at Gen Con to, kit bash into Mech 28 mechs when I get back home. Lastly, a game I supported via crowdfunding and I think Kickstarter technically, and just received the printer-friendly rules download a few days ago. It's a game called Steel Psalm, and I think that they made almost $250,000 on the Kickstarter, but it was for Steel Psalm and then also for Mechborg, which is the RPG version, right? It's based on, again, a 28mm scale mech game, kind of like, Mech 28, so you need to have models that are about 4 inches tall. The rules are based off of the Forbidden Psalm game engine, which I really enjoy. I've talked about Forbidden Psalm in an episode of Why I Like It. Pachow, and now we have a mech game using the same rules engine as a base. I suspect there will be more lore in the full version of the book when it's released. Again, this printer, friendly version is just text, no pictures, no fancy layout or nothing. But I think there will be fancy lore because there are 4 different factions currently listed in the printable rules, but all that stuff will be coming later. Now, this game requires 5 28mm scale mechs per person, again, about a 4-inch mech, which might be more than you're interested in putting together in kit bashing and all that kind of stuff. But otherwise, it plays a lot like Forbidden Psalm and the kind of weird alternate World War I sequel to Forbidden Psalm, The Last War. So it's a fun miniatures rule system, but it's not too, again, crunchy necessarily, but it's got a lot of cool things added into it. It's one of the few mech games that I've come across recently to not bother with tracking heat. So if tracking heat annoys you in mech games, then you might want to take a look at this. Also, there can technically be magic in the game. At least one of the factions seems to sort of have magic. So if that's something that you're looking for, you might want to check this out as well. Follow the link in the description if you want to be able to pre-order off the Kickstarter. But like I said, it's already made its money, but you can still pre-order if you want to. Mech games aren't just regular war games with robots instead of soldiers, right? There's usually a whole host of customization options, gear, weapons, armor placement, all kinds of stuff that you can do for each mech. And frequently, more game states that you have to track, like heat for your mechs. So you have to keep track of the heat on all the mechs in comparison to, say, like soldier games like Warhammer and, all the others. You generally only command 5 or fewer models at any given time in most mech games. And, that's kind of nice when you don't have to have a huge force. Also, I personally really enjoy painting mechs because they're usually very quick and easy to paint. There's a lot of options out there for indie mech games beyond just the 4 that I've mentioned here, but, check these out if you're interested. If you're mech curious and Battletech seems like too much for you or maybe just not your cup of tea, then check these games out. If you have a different mech game that you like rather than the ones that I've mentioned here in the video, drop it in the comments below so that we can all learn. If you liked this video, hitting the like button below would help out the channel and me, and you'll get little tiny fireworks or something like that. That's always fun, right? If you'd like to see more videos from this channel every single Friday, then you can hit subscribe down there as well. It's free. Thanks for watching.